Hello, hello, and welcome to the second half of season 5. I can't believe that we're already halfway through the year. My name is Debbie Heiser. I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. I feel an urgency to help people let go of past messaging so that they can lead a lit up life. And with that, I want to again welcome you. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity. It's a place, another land, another time.
Hello there. Before we get started with this week's episode, I wanted to pop in here just really quickly and offer up to you 2 different ways that you can work with me. I have private clients that I work with throughout the year to help them quantum leap their business, identify what they want their life to look like so that the business becomes a conduit to that versus running their life. And then the second one is a women's mastermind. This is the second one to kick off, and I'm so excited to start this one in 2024. And I believe the retreat is going to be potentially in Belize, but keep an eye out for it. But this is where we get together, again, quantum leap your business, but it's with a group of other really high vibrational, successful business women that want to level up, want to continue to progress in their achievements and in their business. So with that, click away on the website and check out those exciting events. I'd love to either see you as a private client or in the 2024 Women's Mastermind. Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I am coming to you from Sandpoint, Idaho. And I say that because I just got back from a 3-week trip to Italy. And I wanted to talk today a little bit about some of the learnings that I had in Italy. But then also I wanted to introduce myself because I have numerous new listeners and you may or may not know that much about me. We're getting ready to go through some changes here in the business. But what I do is I help people. And I use that term broadly. I tend to focus on women who are entrepreneurs, but I also have men. I also have worked with career people. And so my business model is about an 80-20, 75-25, meaning that most of my clients are women, but the other 25% are men. And same holds true from being an entrepreneur or solopreneur to a career-based person. And what I really help people do is uncover and figure out what it is that they want. I know throughout my lifetime, culturally, we are taught not to say what we want, and particularly women. And so I help people get really clear with that. And that's a big chunk of what we do because there's a lot of emotions that come around uncovering what it is that we really want. And so those emotions can sometimes be joy and happiness and pleasure, but more often than not, it's guilt and it's shame. It's feeling shameful that maybe by saying you want more, that you're not grateful for what you have, or that you're not showing gratitude of some sort. That's not it at all. Most people I talk to, it's interesting, they'll put a qualifier and say, I have a great life, but. And it's not even so much that it doesn't matter to me if somebody qualifies, but what that says to me is that there is some type of message that is internal to them that they feel like they shouldn't want more. They've been told throughout their life that they should just be okay with what they have. They should be grateful for what they have. In comparison to other people, you have a good life, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not suggesting that it's all about abundance. When I say abundance, I don't mean just financial, but it is about leading an abundant life. And when I say abundant, again, it's not all about money, but it's about abundance in relationship. It's about in connection. It's about abundance in the feelings you have around your house, around your apartment, around your car. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, my car was it was just a mess. And here's the thing, your external environment displays what's internal to you. Now, I will tell you, you can kind of see my bookshelf if you're watching on YouTube, that I have some stacks, and I've been in a mode of clearing things out because I feel like I'm not that person that still has clutter as a day-to-day thing. And so when you think about making sure that you have abundance in your environment, also what you're putting into your head, what you're listening to, what you're watching, what kind of abundance do you have around giving back, right? Whether it be to, when I say community, community is a big piece there. So it could be a community, like I'm part of a mastermind, that's part of my community. I lead a mastermind, which is part of my community. I have my friend community, which includes people all over the place. I have the community in which I live and reside in. You know, one of the things that I used to do, and I was very active in this community where I live, and I haven't been as much over the last couple of years. And so as I look at 2024, that's one of the things that I'm looking at. How do I get back involved with some of the organizations here in town that make a difference in people's lives? When you think about, so we talked about environment, contribution to society. When you think about like abundance from a mental perspective, are you learning? Like from an intellectual perspective, are you abundant in the ability to continue to grow? I have this book back here, and in the last podcast, I talked about books, and it's this mindset book around fixed and growth mindset. You know, do you have an abundant, when I say capacity, I don't mean like load, but like this ability to want and desire to learn more. You know, I'm a firm believer that if we stop learning, we stop growing. And when we stop growing, we start dying. And so, you know, how are you stimulating your mental and your intellectual capacity and your emotional capacity? I find, and I think in this world that we, you know, I've been part of this other group that works on emotional stuff. And it's interesting. I think that we as a country, and I saw this even in Italy, and I'll explain the difference there. But like when it comes to emotions, we tend to label emotions as good or bad. And what I found is that I've stopped labeling them good or bad and started looking at and saying, okay, do I know how to process anger? Like if I'm irritated, and I can always tell when my anger meter is starting to go up because I start yelling at people that are driving around me, that's a good indication. And so like, how do I process that anger in a healthy way? How do I feel the feels? You know, and I'm not going to lie, this is not something that comes really naturally to me. But this is also about having this abundant life when it comes to being able to process through and have maturity around and emotional intelligence around how to deal with things from an emotional standpoint. There's also finances and having abundant, you know, when you have some financial freedom, it really does alleviate a lot of stress. We tend to think of debt as bad. Now, you don't want to spend more than you make on a consistent basis, but debt is not bad. Debt is leveraging other people's money. Now, I'm not a huge credit card proponent. Doesn't mean, though, that if you have credit card debt to feel guilt or shame in any way, shape, or form. But, you know, there are some things from working for a credit card company that I just know. And so I try really hard not to have credit card debt. Doesn't mean I don't have debt, because I do. I just have it in a different way. There's also your business or career, like abundance in that. It doesn't necessarily mean, you know, that you're making 5 times what you're making today, or that you're going to be the CEO of the company, or that, you know, you're going to build a multi-million-dollar business, although that's where I'm heading, as far as this desire to make an impact in the world. But it's really about, is it fulfilling? Is it satisfying work? And, you know, one of the things that I noticed, and when I think about all of these areas, when it comes to abundance, I think about the experiences that I had in Italy. And, you know, for those of you that haven't been following me on social media, I actually went and traveled solo for the first time internationally by myself. And I went to Cinque Terre first. I flew into Florence, Italy, and then went to Cinque Terre, which are these 5 beautiful towns up in the cliffs of the ocean that were pirate villages back in the day. And so I didn't go all the way up into some of the trails at the very top. I was kind of nursing a little bit of an ankle injury, and I was by myself. And so, I'd like to go back there and hike those with someone. But went to Cinque Terre, had that experience. I really pushed myself out of my growth in a growth edge. I took the trains. I figured out all of the train system through Europe. A shout out to my friend Angela, who taught me that in France. But I learned some new things around, because one of the things that they do differently in Europe, even at the airport, is they'll say they're not going to announce the gate until a certain time. And so you might have 10 minutes to get to your train or less, because they don't show what platform until about 10 minutes before the train leaves. So you might be standing on platform 1 and need to be on platform 13. So I figured out something with the app. Another solo traveler actually taught me this, that there's a thing that I could look at and it would show me the platform. And it was so helpful, and it helped my stress level go down. So I learned a lot by being open to what other people had known and learned and shared with me. While I was in Cinque Terre, when I think about abundance, I met some of the most fascinating and fabulous people. As a matter of fact, I sat down on the train, and anytime you would hear people speaking English, you would say, "Oh, where are you from?" And this one couple was sitting right across from me and are actually from Priest River, which is a town about 15 minutes, maybe 20, 25 minutes from my house. And so that was really intriguing. We started up this conversation. Anytime I sat down, it was very interesting to me, like how uncomfortable people that were sitting next to me were when I was eating by myself, particularly dinner, because Italians, very much like the French, they kind of extend their eating. They don't take this like badge of honor to go to work at 5 a.m. and skip lunch and don't eat and take care of themselves. Like, they really take care of themselves, and they really, it's a pleasure as far as eating. And so when I looked at that and I sat down, I met all these really interesting people. I had dinner at this one restaurant and met this couple from the UK who were just super pleasant. We're going to stay in touch on WhatsApp. If you don't have WhatsApp, it's a great texting and phone and video system to use internationally. But I met all these wonderful people. So I felt this abundance because I was learning so much. I was really stepping out and doing things that were a little scary to me. And, being a woman walking in the dark, sometimes it feels a little scary. I felt very safe when I was there, but it's some of those types of things, right? And I carried a 33-pound backpack. I had no luggage other than that backpack. So I really pushed myself to do some of these things. So then I proceeded to Florence. I was in Florence a night, and I met two wonderful ladies, Janine and Mary from Seattle, who we hit it off immediately, had a fantastic dinner that night, and then got up the next morning, and I went to the Uffizi in the morning. They went in the afternoon. And then we met up that evening and met the rest of the group. I signed up for a group program through Gonzaga, which, by the way, plug for them. They are going to go in 2024. So keep an eye out because you don't have to be involved in Gonzaga. You don't even have to leave from Spokane. You can be anywhere in the US and go, or anywhere in the world, really, I guess. But anyway, they have a campus in Florence. So we met up with them. We did a farm to market to table excursion, learned all sorts of history about food, about ancient grains. We went to this beautiful restaurant. I tried rabbit for the first time. I can't eat gelato, but I had sorbetto or sorbet, which was fantastic. But anyway, we went to all of these different things. Then we went out to Tuscany and stayed at a monastery that was converted into a hotel. And we went to a family. This is one of the things I really loved, is that things were small. They weren't like these massive production places. And I think there may be some laws in Europe that are very different than the US when it comes to that. But a lot of the restaurants that we went to were family owned, and the family was the one serving and knew some of the instructors that were there and so on and so forth. And it just had real abundance and community. And then same thing when we went to Tuscany, we went to a wine or a vineyard and olive farm and tasted some olive oil and some wine. And it was, the father who couldn't speak English, I think it was his daughter that was the one doing the tour. And she said she always gets to do the tours because she knows English and the rest of her family does not. And so anyway, going through all of that, just watching the like abundance when it came to family and this like, I don't know, this connectedness that I felt that they had with the earth and then also with their families, and, I guess there's probably two sides to every story. Who knows if this woman wanted to be in the olive oil and wine business, but because that's her family business, she's in it, right? So like we're only seeing one side of it. But part of this, as I talk about abundance, is like when I think about, well, I'll finish this. We went to Siena, which is a phenomenal place in Tuscany. And then I went to Rome. Rome, I wasn't as impressed with, other than the fact that it's a live archaeological site everywhere. And it's hard to imagine like before Christ times, like BC and AD times and like what they're uncovering. But I didn't find Rome to be as special for me as Florence. One of the things when I think about the abundance in Florence, and this is where I've been having some conversations with some friends of mine about the difference between pleasure and happiness. And it's interesting because I was looking it up, and the definition of pleasure is having happiness, and happiness is having pleasure. So I'm going to use the word pleasure, and sometimes people get uncomfortable with that because we've also been taught in our society that that has to do with sex. And that's not what I'm talking about, although you should have pleasure there. But what I'm talking about is like when I was walking around Florence, there is so much beauty in that city. The art is everywhere. It's built into buildings. There are statues. There's marble. The chapel there was just, it was hard for me to fathom the amount of marble and the weight of that building, and that it's still standing. And even through World War II and World War I. And when I went to the Uffizi, my friend Carrie said to me, I told her I'm not a big art person. She said, you have to go to the Uffizi. And I'm so glad I did. It was so beautiful. And the artwork is beautiful. I don't do overwhelm, but I will tell you, it was almost a sensory overload in Florence. One of the things that I sat and I was doing a lot of journaling while I was there, and I was sitting out at the little cafe in the Uffizi, and I was right next to this old building that I think might have been like the city hall or something, and it had bells in it. And it was noon, and all of a sudden these bells started going off, and I could feel the vibration of the bells ringing. And that was one of my favorite times, because just the abundance of the smells, and they were pleasant smells, by the way. But the smells, the food, the sensory of like the music. We walked up and this opera singer was singing, that just phenomenal, beautiful, almost brought tears to your eyes when you were standing there. And so when I think about abundance, I think about happiness and pleasure along with that. And so part of, I guess, what I wanted to talk about today, and hopefully in the last 20 some minutes or so, you've learned a little bit of this, is that I think one of the biggest things I learned in Italy, and I found this a little bit in France too, and I talked about like the extension of time in past recordings, when my experience in France, but with Italy, it was really about accepting and receiving pleasure and not feeling guilt or shame about it. Right? If I'm enjoying something, like I think about the sorbet that I had, and I imagined at one point that it was a chocolate ice cream cone, the chocolate gelato, but like just sitting there really enjoying that sorbet and how pleasurable that was, versus like trying to scarf it down because I was running on to the next thing. And when I think about the art and the passion that the Italians have, it came through in the way that they serve their food, in the way that they serve their communities, in the way that they serve their families, in the businesses that they're in, the way that they were so helpful. One of the best things about Rome is I did a 7-hour walking tour, thanks to my friend Amelia who recommended it. And the tour guide was just so helpful and so friendly. And he said, I have to go catch my train in 25 minutes, but I will help you with anything. And, just the kindness of the people was really inspiring, and particularly because there were a lot of tourists there, even in October, and it was actually surprising how many people, and walking in and seeing the art and seeing like the David and the sculptures that these artists had done like centuries ago. It was really amazing. And so I guess I'd like for you to leave this podcast thinking about, where do I feel abundance? It's like we're always searching for abundance, but we all have abundance right now. I don't care how much money you have in the bank. There's something happening in your life that is abundant, whether it be a relationship, whether it be the joy, like I had so much pleasure watching my grandson the other night when I got home. Pretty quickly, the next day I went and saw my son and daughter-in-law and grandson, and watching him at this little brewery that we went and had some tater tots, and he was running with this Tonka truck and having so much fun with it, and Gaga, come help me, like it was just such a pleasure to watch him enjoy that. And so I would just, in a nice way, challenge you to, even if you're like in a terrible mood or feeling upset about something, look at where the abundance is. Even the fact that when we live in the United States, that's even a huge abundance. And I will tell you, I was super grateful because the Europeans do smoke a lot, and they smoke outside and at the tables and everywhere else. And I realized how grateful I was to live in a state or in a country that I don't have to be around that when I'm eating particularly. But really search for that abundance. And when I say search, that sounds kind of graspy. What I mean by that is just look at what's right in front of you. Because like in Florence, I'd be walking, and if I wasn't paying attention, I would miss all this beautiful, and sometimes I did because it was just a lot. But that's all I'm asking is stand where you're at and look at those areas that I talked about. Where do you have abundance? Where do you have like a place that you find pleasure? And with that, I'm going to leave you with that. So here's the deal. If you want to gain more clarity, you want to have a conversation about what I just talked about, please go out to my website and sign up for a consult. Doesn't mean I'm going to sell you anything. Let's just have a conversation. I would love to chat with you. And with that, it's a wrap. We'll talk to you next Tuesday. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for listening. The song Ride is co-written and sung by Miss Jackie Wilson and her collaborators Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee. And a huge shout out to them for allowing us to use this perfect song. Everyone have a fabulous week, and I'll talk to you next week.